The moment she said it, I felt smaller than the chair she pointed to. The room was loud with children's laughter and the scrape of paper plates. Balloons bobbed against the ceiling fan, their strings whispering every time the blades passed. Somewhere behind me, someone clapped as my grandson tore into a gift. I didn't turn around. I was standing there holding a wrapped box with a blue bow when my daughter-in-law leaned close and said very calmly, "The table is full. You'll have to sit at the back. Or maybe just step out for a bit." She smiled when she said it. That was the part that stayed with me. I remember nodding because that's what I've always done when I don't want to make a scene. I remember my hands tightening around the gift, the paper crinkling under my fingers. I remember thinking I must have misheard her, that maybe the music was too loud, that maybe she meant something else. But then she added, quieter this time, "This is for family." And just like that, I walked past the long dining table where my son sat with his friends, his arm resting comfortably behind her chair. He didn't look up. He was laughing at something someone said, his eyes crinkled the way they used to when he was a boy and I'd surprise him with pancakes on a school morning. I waited for him to notice me. I slowed my steps just a little. He didn't. The back of the room smelled like leftover pizza and sugar frosting. Someone had stacked empty soda bottles near the trash, and they tipped when I brushed past them. I sat on a folding chair by the wall, my knees pressed together, my purse on my lap like a shield. The gift rested at my feet. That was the first time I realized I had already been moved out of the picture. Before that day, my life had been quiet in the way most women my age come to accept. Not lonely, just steady. I lived alone in the small house my husband and I bought 32 years ago, before the paint started peeling and the floorboards learned where to creak. After he passed, the house grew louder in strange ways. The refrigerator hummed too long. The clock in the hallway ticked like it was keeping score. But it was mine. Every morning I made coffee the same way, 2 spoons of sugar, 1 slice of toast, sometimes burned because I'd forget it while looking out the kitchen window. My son Everett used to call every Sunday. Short conversations, weather, work, how the baby was growing. After he married Rachel, the calls became less frequent, not stopped, just thinned like soup with too much water. Rachel came into our lives quickly. She was efficient. Polite in the way that keeps you at arm's length. The first time she came over for dinner, she rearranged my napkins without asking, smiled, said, "I hope you don't mind, I like symmetry." I told her I didn't and I meant it. At least I thought I did. When my grandson was born, I stood in the hospital room holding him, breathing in that soft, milky smell babies carry. Rachel watched me closely, her hands folded in front of her, her smile tight but present. I told myself she was just tired. New mothers are protective. I understood that. I had been one once. I tried to give her space. I waited to be invited. I asked before stopping by. I brought groceries instead of opinions. I folded myself smaller each time, thinking that was how love worked now. Still, there were moments, small ones. Easy to explain away. Like the time I arrived for dinner and my place at the table had been replaced with a high chair for the baby, even though he was already asleep. Or the time Rachel corrected me in front of guests when I called Everett by his childhood nickname. "He doesn't like that anymore," she said without looking at him. I noticed, I always noticed, but I stayed quiet. The birthday party was supposed to be simple. Just cake, balloons, a few friends. Rachel had told me to come early. "It'll help if you're here," she said over the phone. Her voice was pleasant, almost warm, so I did. I brought the gift she'd approved. I wore the sweater Everett once said made me look nice and put together. I even practiced what I'd say when people asked how I liked being a grandmother, something light, something grateful. For the first hour, I floated around the edges, refilling cups, wiping sticky fingers. I felt useful, seen in a small way. Then the table filled up, plates were set, chairs pulled in. Rachel moved with purpose, directing people where to sit. She didn't look at me until there were no seats left. Then she turned, glanced at the empty space behind the table and made her decision. That's when she said it. "The table is full, get out of here." Not loudly, not angrily, just final. I sat there at the back watching my grandson's candles flicker from across the room. I sang along when everyone else did, my voice low enough not to stand out. When it came time for gifts, Rachel handed them out to be opened. Mine stayed by my feet. Everett never asked why I wasn't at the table. When I left, Rachel hugged me, briefly. She said, "Thanks for understanding." I drove home with the radio off, the silence pressing against my ears. My hands shook on the steering wheel. At a red light, I realized I was crying, not the loud kind. Just tears slipping down one after another like they'd been waiting their turn. That night, I placed the unopened gift back on my kitchen table. I didn't wrap it away. I didn't return it. I just sat there staring at it and wondered how long I had been disappearing from my own family without noticing. Because what Rachel said at that party wasn't just about a chair. It was about where she thought I belonged. And for the first time, I began to wonder if this wasn't accidental at all. The house felt different after the party, like it had taken sides. Every sound startled me. The refrigerator clicked on too loudly. The wind brushed against the windows like someone trying to listen in. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, watching the shadows crawl across it, thinking about the way Rachel's voice had sounded. Calm, certain, like she'd rehearsed it. By morning, my eyes were dry and sore. I got up anyway. Habit has a way of carrying you when your heart feels too heavy to move on its own. I made coffee, burned the toast again, sat at the small kitchen table with only one chair pulled out, though there were four. I hadn't moved the others since my husband died. I told myself it was because they got in the way. The truth was simpler. Empty chairs remind you who isn't coming back. Everett used to sit at that table when he was little, his legs swinging because they couldn't touch the floor. He'd ask 100 questions before finishing his cereal. Why the sky changed color, why ants walked in lines, why his father always whistled when he fixed things. I raised him mostly alone after his father's long hours turned into longer absences. I learned how to stretch meals, how to sew buttons back on, how to listen without interrupting when he came home upset. I wasn't perfect, I know that, but I was present, always present. When Everett met Rachel, I tried to be careful with my love. I didn't want to overwhelm her. Some women mistake warmth for intrusion. I'd seen it happen before, so I softened myself, smiled more than I spoke, asked questions instead of giving advice. At first, Rachel appreciated it, or at least she said she did. You're so easy, she told me once early on. My friends warned me about mothers-in-law. I laughed, though something about the word easy didn't sit right in my chest. Still, I thought we were building something steady. Not close maybe, but respectful. That seemed like enough. After the party, though, I started replaying moments I'd filed away and forgotten. Not dramatic things, just small corrections, subtle shifts. Rachel deciding holidays without asking. Rachel changing the baby's clothes after I'd dressed him, even when he was comfortable. Rachel referring to my visits as help instead of time together. Each memory arrived quietly like a knock I'd ignored too long. I spent the day cleaning, though the house didn't need it. Wiped counters that were already clear, folded towels I hadn't used. I avoided the kitchen table, the gift still sitting there untouched. I told myself I'd drop it off later, or mail it, or save it for another day. By afternoon, my phone buzzed. Everett's name lit up the screen. For a moment, I just stared at it. Then I answered. "Hi, Mom," he said. His voice sounded normal. That almost hurt more. "Hi," I said back. I kept my tone even, calm, like nothing had happened. "Rachel said you left early yesterday," he continued. "Everything okay?" There it was, not concern, just information. "Yes," I said, "everything's fine." A pause. I could hear something clinking in the background. "Dishes maybe." "Good," he said. "Hey, we're thinking of doing Christmas at our place this year, less driving with the baby and all." I closed my eyes. "That makes sense," I said. "Just let me know what time." "Sure," he replied, relieved. I could hear it in the way his shoulders must have relaxed. "I'll talk to Rachel and text you." After we hung up, I sat very still. My hands rested flat on the table. The gift sat between them like an accusation. I realized then that Everett hadn't noticed anything because he didn't need to. Rachel handled the space between us. She organized it, controlled it, and he trusted her to do so. That evening, I took a walk around the block. The air smelled like wet pavement and someone's laundry detergent. A neighbor waved. I waved back. Life went on, unbothered by the small, private ache inside my chest. I told myself I was overthinking. That families change, that sons grow up and move away emotionally before they do physically, that this was normal, but something in me had shifted. The next time I saw Rachel was a week later when I stopped by to drop off some old baby clothes I'd found in the attic. She hadn't asked for them. I brought them anyway, proof maybe that I still belonged. She opened the door holding my grandson on her hip. He reached for me immediately, his little hands grabbing at my sweater. I felt that familiar swell in my chest, the one that says here, "This is love." Rachel adjusted her grip. "Careful," she said, "he just ate." I nodded and took him gently. His head smelled like soap and warm milk. I could have stood there all day. We sat in the living room, Rachel perched on the arm of the couch scrolling through her phone. I waited for her to look up, to say something, anything. Instead, she said, "We're trying to set some boundaries." I looked at her. About visits," she replied, finally meeting my eyes. "I think it's better if you call before coming over and maybe keep things shorter. It throws off the baby's routine." "I did call," I said softly. She waved her hand. "Yes, but still, you understand." I wanted to say that I always understood. That understanding had become my second language. Instead, I asked, "Did I do something wrong?" She smiled again, that same polite curve of her mouth. "No, not wrong, just too much sometimes." The words landed carefully, but they landed all the same. I handed my grandson back and stood up. My legs felt unsteady, like I'd stood too quickly. "I'll go," I said. "I don't want to disrupt anything." Rachel nodded, satisfied. "Thanks for being flexible." On the drive home, I didn't cry. I felt hollow, like a room someone had emptied out without telling me. That night, I called my sister. I hadn't planned to. The phone rang twice before she answered. "You sound tired," she said immediately. I told her about the party, about the chair, about the words Rachel used. There was a long silence on the other end. "That's not okay," my sister said finally. I swallowed. "Maybe I misunderstood." "No," she replied, "you didn't." Her certainty startled me. It felt dangerous, like opening a door I'd been holding shut. "What do I do?" I asked. She sighed. "You stop pretending this is accidental." After we hung up, I sat in the dark living room, the television off, the clock ticking steadily. For the first time, I let myself name the feeling I'd been avoiding. This wasn't distance. It was deliberate. And once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. After my sister said those words, I started paying attention in a way I hadn't before, not with anger. Not with a plan, just with quiet awareness. There's a difference between being patient and being absent from your own life. I'd spent years confusing the two. The next few weeks passed with a strange heaviness. Everett texted instead of calling, short messages, updates about the baby. Pictures sent without context, like proof of life. Rachel stopped replying altogether unless it was necessary. If I asked a question, she answered with one word. If I suggested a visit, she said she'd check the schedule. I stopped suggesting. Instead, I watched. I noticed how birthdays were decided without me, how family group chats went silent when I joined them, how plans were made and then casually mentioned after they'd already happened. Once I found out they'd taken my grandson to the zoo for the first time. Everett posted pictures online. I stared at them longer than I should have, my thumb hovering over the screen. I wanted to ask why I hadn't been invited. I wanted to comment something light, something supportive. I did neither. That night I dreamed I was standing in a crowded room calling Everett's name. He was there somewhere, but he never turned around. The dream stayed with me all morning. I tried to be practical about it. I told myself Rachel was overwhelmed. New motherhood changes people. I told myself Everett was busy. Life moves fast when you're young. But small things kept adding up. At Christmas, they arrived late. Rachel breezed in first, her arms full of gifts, already talking. Everett followed, carrying the baby carrier, his eyes scanning the room. When he saw me, he smiled, surprised, like he hadn't expected me to be there at all. "Mom," he said, leaning in for a quick hug. "Merry Christmas." Rachel handed gifts to everyone except me. Mine came last after the wrapping paper had piled high and the baby had grown fussy. She placed it in my lap without comment. When I opened it, it was a candle, scented, generic. I smiled and thanked her. She nodded. "We didn't know what to get you." That evening, when it was time to eat, I found my place already taken by a high chair again. No one said anything. I took a plate and sat on the couch, balancing it on my knees like a guest in my own family. I watched Rachel laugh with Everett's cousins, watched her mother sit comfortably at the table, her hand resting near the baby. I noticed how easily she fit. How no one questioned her presence. Later, while I washed dishes, Rachel came up beside me. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I don't mind," I replied. She leaned against the counter. "I just think maybe it's time you started building a fuller life, hobbies, friends. Things outside of us." The water ran too loudly in the sink. I turned it down. "Are you saying I depend on you too much?" I asked. She tilted her head, considering. "I'm saying boundaries are healthy." I dried my hand slowly, that word again, boundaries. It had become her favorite, a way to draw lines without ever saying why. That night I drove home through streets lit with holiday lights, houses glowing from the inside. Families gathered around tables where chairs were pulled close, not pushed away. I parked in my driveway and sat there, engine running, staring at my dark windows. For the first time since my husband died, I didn't want to go inside. Something was happening. I could feel it now clearly, not a single event, a pattern, and patterns don't form by accident. The real shift came in the spring. Everett called one afternoon, his voice tense. "Mom," he said, "Rachel's been feeling uncomfortable." I held the phone tighter. "About what?" He hesitated. "About you." I closed my eyes. "She feels judged," he continued. "Like you don't approve of how we're raising the baby." "That's not true," I said immediately. "I've never said." "I know," he cut in gently but firmly. "But sometimes it's not about what you say, it's how you look or what you don't say." I pictured Rachel's smile. That polite, careful curve. "What has she told you?" I asked. Another pause, longer this time. "She thinks you undermine her," he said, "that you try to make her feel small." The words felt unreal, like they belonged to someone else's story. "I've done nothing but step back," I said. My voice shook despite my effort to keep it steady. "I ask permission for everything. I apologize for things I don't understand." "I know," Everett said. "I told her that, but she's sensitive, and she's the mother. I need to support her." There it was, I swallowed. "So what are you asking me to do?" He exhaled. "Just give us some space for a while." "How much space?" I asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "We'll let you know." After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen, the phone still in my hand. The clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. The house waited. I thought about all the times I'd given space without being asked, all the times I'd folded myself away quietly, all the times I'd chosen peace over presence, and still it wasn't enough. That evening, I took out an old photo album, one I hadn't opened in years. Everett as a baby, wrapped in a blanket that was too big for him. Everett on his first day of school, backpack crooked, smile missing 2 teeth. Everett at his college graduation, scanning the crowd until he found me. I realized something then that made my chest ache. Rachel didn't just want boundaries, she wanted control of the story. In her version, I wasn't a mother who loved too much. I was a problem that needed managing. In Everett, my son had accepted that version without ever asking me if it was true. The next time I saw Rachel, it was brief, a passing moment at a family gathering. She smiled. Asked how I was, perfectly pleasant. I answered politely, just as she'd taught me, but inside something had hardened, not into anger, into clarity. I understood now that the party hadn't been a misunderstanding. It had been a test, and I had passed it by disappearing. The question that followed me home that night was simple and terrifying. What would happen if I stopped? The moment I stopped shrinking, the truth began to show itself. Not all at once, not dramatically. It arrived the way most painful truths do, quietly through other people's mouths. It started with a phone call from my cousin Linda. She's the kind of woman who doesn't gossip, not because she lacks curiosity, but because she believes words carry weight. So when she called me one afternoon and asked carefully, "Are you doing okay with everything?" I knew something had already happened. "With what?" I asked. She hesitated. I could hear the television murmuring in the background of her living room, a game show, maybe, normal life continuing. "With Everett and Rachel," she said finally. "I didn't know if you were aware." Aware of what? That question didn't make it out of my mouth. "I ran into Rachel at the market last week," Linda continued. "We talked for a bit. She mentioned you were struggling." My grip tightened on the phone. "Struggling how?" Linda sighed. "She said you've been having a hard time letting go, that you've been inserting yourself in ways that make her uncomfortable. She said you've been emotional, unstable." I sat down slowly. "She said that?" My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. "Yes," Linda said gently. "And she said Everett agrees?" For a moment, all I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. Unstable, emotional, words that stick once spoken aloud, words that change how people look at you. "I've barely seen them," I said. "I've been asked to give space." "I know," Linda replied. "That's why I wanted to call you, because the way she said it, it didn't sit right with me." After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. The house felt heavier than usual, like it was pressing in on me, waiting to see what I'd do next. That was the betrayal, not the party, not the chair. It was the story she was telling about me when I wasn't in the room. I began to understand how neatly Rachel had been working. How gently, how convincingly. She never raised her voice, never argued outright. She framed everything as concern, as protection, as what was best for the family. and slowly, carefully, she had turned me into a threat. I thought back to that conversation with Everett. The words he'd used, sensitive, undermining, emotional, they hadn't come from him, they had been planted. Once I saw that, the past rearranged itself in my mind. Every boundary, every correction, every polite smile that carried a quiet message beneath it. You don't belong here the way you think you do. The next few days I said nothing to anyone. I didn't call Everett. I didn't confront Rachel. I needed to be sure, not just emotionally, logically, so I paid attention. I noticed how my invitations went unanswered while Rachel's mother posted photos from visits I didn't know about. How extended family members spoke to me differently now, carefully, like I might break. How conversations stopped just a second too late when I entered a room. I had been labeled. And labels, once applied, are hard to peel off. The confirmation came at a family barbecue. I hadn't planned to go. I told myself I was tired, but something in me insisted. If I stayed away, the story would continue without me. And I was tired of being absent from my own life. Rachel greeted me at the door with a kiss on the cheek. "So good to see you," she said warmly, loud enough for others to hear. I smiled back. Throughout the afternoon, she checked on me often. Asked if I needed water, a chair, shade, each gesture performed with care, each one witnessed. When I tried to speak to Everett alone, she appeared beside us within seconds. Later, as people gathered near the grill, I overheard a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. Rachel was speaking to one of Everett's aunts. Her voice was low, sympathetic. "It's been hard," she said. "We're trying to support her, but she doesn't always respect our space. Everett worries about her living alone so much." The aunt nodded. "That must be stressful." "It is," Rachel replied softly. "We just want what's healthiest for everyone." I stood there holding a paper plate that suddenly felt too heavy. She wasn't angry with me. She was erasing me, reducing me to a concern, a burden. Someone to be managed quietly, kindly, out of the way. I left shortly after without saying goodbye. That night I didn't cry. I felt something sharper, clearer. Grief had given way to resolve. I called Everett the next morning. He answered on the second ring. "Mom. I need to talk to you," I said. "In person." There was a pause. "About what?" "About me," I replied. "And what's being said about me?" He hesitated. "Rachel's been under a lot of stress. I'm not calling to discuss her stress," I said calmly. "I'm asking for time with my son." Another pause, longer. "Okay," he said finally. "Come by tomorrow." When I arrived, Rachel wasn't home. Everett said she'd taken the baby to her mother's. We sat at the kitchen table. The same table where I'd once watched him do homework, chewing the end of his pencil. He looked tired, older. "I've heard you're telling people I'm unstable," I said gently. His eyes widened. "What? No, Rachel is," I replied, "and she's saying you agree." He ran a hand through his hair. "She didn't mean it like that." "How did she mean it?" I asked. "She's just worried," he said. "You've been alone. She thinks you need more support." I leaned forward. "Everett, look at me. Have I ever asked you for more than you could give?" "No," he said quickly. "Have I interfered with your marriage?" "No." "Have I disrespected your wife?" He hesitated. "That pause," I said softly. "That's where the problem is." He sighed. "She feels judged." "I can't fix feelings I don't create," I replied, "but I won't carry accusations that aren't true." He looked down at the table. "I need you to understand something," I continued. "I've been stepping back for years, quietly, kindly, and still I'm being painted as the problem. That tells me this isn't about boundaries." He looked up then, confused, uncertain. "What is it about?" he asked. I swallowed. "It's about control," I said, "and I think you know that." The silence stretched between us, heavy, uncomfortable. "I love you," I added. "And I love my grandson, but I will not disappear so someone else can feel powerful." He didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. "I didn't know it was this bad." That was all he said. But it was enough to tell me one thing. The truth had finally been spoken out loud, and once spoken, it could no longer be ignored. After that conversation with Everett, I didn't rush to do anything. That surprised me. For years, my instinct had been to fix, to smooth things over, to apologize even when I wasn't sure what I'd done wrong. But this time, something in me understood that rushing would only hand the story back to Rachel. So I waited, not in anger, in stillness. Everett didn't call for 3 days. On the 4th, he sent a short message. "Can we talk again soon?" I replied, "Yes, when you're ready." Those words were new to me. When you're ready. They placed responsibility where it belonged. In the meantime, I focused on what I could control. I stopped explaining myself to people who hadn't asked. I stopped correcting rumors gently, hoping they'd fade. Instead, when someone hinted at concern, "Are you okay living alone?" I answered plainly, "I'm well," I said, "and I'm capable." The word capable felt important. I also did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote things down, not a letter to send, just notes, dates, conversations, phrases that stuck, not out of bitterness but clarity. Gaslighting works best when memories blur. I wasn't going to let that happen anymore. One afternoon, I ran into Rachel's mother at the grocery store. She smiled brightly. "Oh, it's been so long. How are you?" "I'm well," I said. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Rachel worries about you." I met her eyes. I wish she'd talk to me instead of about me. Her smile faltered just slightly. "Well," she said, straightening, "she only wants what's best." "So do I replied, "for all of us." I walked away before she could respond. That small moment mattered more than it should have. It told me the story hadn't stayed contained. It had traveled, carefully, strategically. When Everett finally came by, he looked different, less defensive, more tired. He sat on my couch, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the floor. "Rachel's upset," he said. "I imagine she might be," I replied. "She feels like you're accusing her," he continued. "Of manipulating things." "I'm naming my experience," I said calmly. "If it feels like an accusation, maybe there's a reason." He looked up then. "She says you're trying to turn me against her." I let that sit between us. "Everett," I said gently, "I'm not asking you to choose sides, I'm asking you to see clearly." He rubbed his face with his hands. "She cries a lot, she says she feels attacked." "I believe she feels that way," I said. "Feelings aren't facts." He exhaled slowly. "She wants boundaries, clear ones." "So do I replied. That seemed to surprise him. "What kind?" he asked. I thought carefully before answering. "I want our conversations to be direct," I said. "No more messages passed through other people. No more stories told without me present." He nodded slowly. "I want time with my grandson that isn't supervised like a transaction," I continued, "and I want to be spoken about with respect." He was quiet. "And if that can't happen," I finished, "then I'll step back fully. On my terms." His head snapped up. "You wouldn't." "I would," I said softly, "because staying half present hurts more than leaving with dignity." That was the first time he looked afraid. "Let me talk to her," he said. "I hope you do," I replied. "But understand this isn't a negotiation, it's a boundary." After he left, my hands shook. Setting boundaries feels unnatural when you've spent a lifetime being the flexible one, but beneath the fear was something steadier, relief. Rachel didn't contact me directly. Instead, an email arrived 2 days later, long, carefully worded, full of concern and disappointment. She wrote about feeling judged, about needing safety, about how hard motherhood had been. She never mentioned the party, never mentioned the chair, never mentioned the words she'd used. She ended with, "I hope you can reflect on how your actions have impacted our family." I read it twice, then once more, then I replied, briefly, "I am always willing to reflect. I am not willing to accept false narratives about my character. When you're ready to speak directly and honestly, I'm open to that conversation." I didn't apologize, that was new too. The fallout wasn't immediate, it arrived in stages. I was uninvited from a weekend trip they'd planned, told it was too much right now. I accepted without comment. A cousin called, awkward, asking if I was okay. I told her yes. I heard through others that Rachel felt unsafe, that she believed I was trying to assert control. I didn't correct them, instead I lived my life. I joined a book club at the library. Started walking every morning. Repainted the spare room that had held Everett's childhood things. I donated some of them, not out of spite, out of acceptance. Space, I was learning, can be healing when it's chosen. Months passed, then one afternoon my phone rang. It was Everett. His voice sounded different, quieter. "She wants to meet," he said, "all of us." I closed my eyes. "Okay," I said. "Where?" "Here," he replied, "but just talk, no accusations." I almost laughed. "I can only promise honesty," I said. When I arrived, Rachel sat stiffly on the couch, Everett beside her, the baby asleep in another room. She didn't smile this time. "I feel attacked," she began. "I feel erased," I replied. We sat there, two women finally saying the quiet parts out loud. She admitted she felt threatened. That she'd worried I'd take her place. That controlling the narrative had felt safer than confronting her insecurity. "I didn't think it would hurt you this much," she said. "I told you," I replied gently. Every time I stepped back, The conversation didn't fix everything, but it shifted something important. Rachel stopped speaking about me to others. Everett started calling again. Slowly, carefully, and one day, months later at another family gathering, there was a chair waiting for me at the table, not at the back. I sat down without comment. That was my action. Not revenge, presence. The chair at the table didn't fix everything. I want to be honest about that. It was a gesture, not a transformation. A sign that something had shifted, not that it had healed. But gestures matter when they come after silence. They tell you who has finally been listening. That family gathering was for Everett's cousin's engagement. A backyard event, string lights overhead, folding tables arranged in long lines. The same kind of setup as my grandson's birthday party months before, only this time no one pointed me toward the back. Rachel arrived with Everett and the baby. She greeted people politely. When she saw me, she paused just a second. Then she said hello, neutral, civil. That was new. I noticed eyes on us. Subtle glances from relatives who'd heard things but never asked. People are always curious when a quiet woman stops disappearing. When dinner was announced, Rachel placed the baby's things on one chair and then moved them, clearing the space beside Everett. "For you," she said, not looking at me. I sat. The table filled around us. Conversation resumed. Plates passed. For the first time in a long while, I felt anchored instead of tolerated. No one said anything out loud. That's not how these things happen. The consequence was quieter. The story shifted. People noticed I was present, that I wasn't fragile. That I laughed at jokes and contributed to conversations and left when I was ready, not when I was dismissed. Rachel's careful concern had nowhere to land. Later that evening, an aunt leaned toward me and whispered, "It's good to see you. We've missed you." I met her eyes. "I've been here." That was the truth. The real public consequence came later in ways I hadn't anticipated. It came when Everett's coworkers met me at a holiday party and said, "Oh, so you're his mom. He talks about you all the time." It came when Rachel's friends stopped looking at me with pity and started asking me questions directly. It came when Rachel herself corrected someone who implied I was having a hard time. "She's doing great," she said. "She's very independent." The words tasted strange, even from her mouth. But she said them, and that mattered. Control relies on isolation. Once the isolation breaks, control weakens. I didn't gloat. I didn't bring up the past. I simply existed fully in the spaces I'd been pushed out of. That was enough. Rachel struggled with that more than she expected. I could see it in the way she watched me now, less dismissive, more cautious. She was learning that I wouldn't compete, but I also wouldn't vanish. One afternoon, she asked me to babysit. The request came through Everett first, as if testing the water. "Rachel has an appointment," he said. "She wondered if you'd be willing." I took a breath before answering. "Yes," I said, "I would." When Rachel dropped the baby off, she lingered at the door, gave instructions, checked her phone, hesitated. "You can call if you need anything," she said. "I've raised a child," I replied gently, "but I'll call if I have questions." She nodded, embarrassed. When she left, the house filled with small sounds again, toys clacking, soft breathing during nap time. The simple weight of my grandson in my arms. I didn't post pictures. I didn't tell anyone. I held the moment quietly, like something sacred. When Rachel returned, the baby was asleep. The house tidy, no drama. She looked around, surprised. "Thank you," she said. "You're welcome," I replied. That was all. From then on, things were adjusted, not warm, not hostile, balanced. And balance, I learned, can be powerful. At the next birthday party, Rachel didn't speak for me. She didn't direct me. She asked, "Would you like to sit here?" I said yes. Others noticed. Later, my sister leaned over and whispered, "Looks like things changed." "They did," I said, "because I did." The moral consequence was Rachel's embarrassment. It wasn't public shaming or dramatic apologies. It was this: she lost control of the narrative, not because I took it from her, but because I stopped giving it away. I watched Everett too. He'd grown quieter, more thoughtful, less reactive to emotion. He listened more now, asked questions before assuming answers. One evening he said, "I should have noticed sooner." I didn't argue. "I needed you to," I replied. The hardest part of all of this wasn't being dismissed. It was being misunderstood. And the healing didn't come from forcing understanding. It came from standing still long enough for the truth to catch up. By the time summer came, things had settled into something recognizable, not the past. Something new. I was no longer a background figure. I was a presence. And presence, when held with dignity, teaches others how to treat you. Healing didn't arrive all at once. It came in small, ordinary moments. The kind you don't recognize as important until you look back and realize they changed everything. One afternoon, Rachel called me directly, not Everett. Not a message passed through someone else. Me, I stared at the phone for a long moment before answering. "Hello?" "Hi," she said. Her voice was cautious, stripped of performance. "I was wondering if you're free this Friday." I waited. "I have a work thing," she continued. "Everett can't get off early. I thought maybe you could watch the baby." There was no apology in her voice. But there was something else, respect. "Yes," I said, "I'm free." After we hung up, I sat quietly, letting the feeling settle, not triumph, not vindication, recognition. When Friday came, Rachel stayed longer than usual. She watched as I fed the baby, changed him, sang softly when he fussed. She didn't correct me, didn't hover. When she left, she paused at the door. "I know things have been tense," she said. "I'm trying to do better." I nodded. "So am I." That was all that needed saying. Over the following months, our relationship found a rhythm. Not close, not distant, functional, honest. Rachel stopped framing her fears as facts. When she felt overwhelmed, she said so. When she needed space, she named it without blame. And I stopped over-accommodating. I didn't rush to help unless asked. I didn't apologize for existing. I showed up as myself, calm, present, whole. Everett noticed the change first. "You seem lighter," he said one evening as we walked together after dinner. "I am," I replied. "I stopped carrying things that weren't mine." He nodded, thoughtful. "I think I did too." We talked more now. Real conversations, about work, about parenting, about mistakes. One night he admitted I was afraid to confront her. I thought choosing peace meant choosing silence. "That's a common mistake," I said gently. "Did I fail you?" he asked. I stopped walking and turned to face him. "You hurt me," I said, "but you're learning, that matters." He hugged me then, not quickly, not awkwardly, fully. That hug closed a door I'd been standing in for months. The true healing came the day Rachel and I were alone together. No baby, no Everett. Just the two of us in her kitchen. She was making coffee, nervous. I could see it in the way she moved things unnecessarily. "I need to say something," she said. I waited. "I felt invisible after the baby was born," she admitted. "Everyone had opinions, expectations." "In you," she trailed off. What?" I asked. "You felt permanent," she said quietly. "Like I'd always be compared to you. I didn't know how to handle that." I considered her words. "I was never your competition," I said. "I was your support. But I understand how fear can twist things." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I thought if I controlled things, I'd feel safer." "Control feels like safety," I said, "until it costs you connection." She looked at me then, really looked. "I'm sorry," she said. The word wasn't perfect. It didn't erase anything, but it was real. "I accept," I replied. That didn't mean everything became easy. There were still moments of tension. Old habits don't disappear overnight, but there was no longer a campaign against me, no whispered concern, no carefully constructed distance. I had my place, not because it was given back, because I claimed it. The greatest gift in all of this wasn't my seat at the table. It was my relationship with myself. I learned that being calm doesn't mean being quiet. That dignity doesn't require silence. That love doesn't ask you to disappear. When my grandson started walking, he toddled toward me without hesitation. Arms out, laughing. Rachel watched, smiled, didn't flinch, and in that moment I knew we were going to be okay, not perfect, but honest. And honest relationships, I've learned, are the only ones worth keeping. By the time autumn arrived, the house felt different again, not fuller, just steadier. I noticed it in the mornings when the quiet no longer felt accusatory. The clock still ticked, the refrigerator still hummed. But the sounds didn't press against me the way they once had. They existed. And so did I. Rachel began inviting me to things without rehearsing the invitation first. A lunch, a short walk with the baby, a quick stop by the house. Nothing grand, nothing symbolic, normal. Normal had become precious. One afternoon, she asked if I wanted to help plan my grandson's second birthday. The question caught me off guard. "Help how?" I asked. "Well," she said, scrolling through ideas on her phone, "you're good with details. And you know the family better than I do." There it was, acknowledgement, not flattery, not obligation, trust. "I'd be happy to," I said. We sat at the kitchen table together, passing ideas back and forth. Colors, snacks, who might come. She listened when I spoke, really listened. And when she disagreed, she said so plainly, without edge. "I think that might be too much," she said once, gently. I smiled. "You're probably right." The party itself was small, backyard again, balloons again, cake again. But this time when I arrived, Rachel handed me a plate and said, "Sit with us." I did. No one announced it. No one needed to. Later, as my grandson smeared frosting across his face, Rachel leaned over and laughed. The sound surprised me. It was unguarded, almost girl-like. In that moment, I saw her differently, not as an antagonist, not as a threat, as a woman who had been scared and unprepared and too proud to say so. I understood her better now, not because she'd explained herself fully, but because I'd stopped viewing everything through pain. Pain distorts, distance clarifies. After the guests left, Rachel helped me gather plates. Everett took the baby inside. The sun was setting, the sky bruised with purple and gold. "I'm glad you came early this time," she said. "So am I replied. She hesitated. "I want you to know I don't feel like I have to compete anymore." I met her eyes. Neither do I. That night, driving home, I realized something important. The story didn't end when the conflict resolved. It ended when I stopped needing it to be different than it was. That winter, Everett and Rachel asked me to stay with them for a week while they traveled for work. In their home, sleeping in the guest room, waking up to the baby's cries, folding tiny clothes. I didn't overstep, I didn't disappear, I lived there as myself. Rachel left me a note on the counter before they went to the airport. "Thank you for being here, we trust you." I folded the note and placed it in my purse, not as proof, as reminder. Not every day was easy after that. Sometimes old habits peeked through. Rachel still liked things done a certain way. I still preferred quiet over confrontation. But now when something felt off, we talked. Not perfectly, but honestly. Everett changed too. He no longer acted as messenger. If something needed saying, he said it. If something felt wrong, he asked questions. One evening, he admitted, "I used to think keeping everyone calm was my job. And now," I asked, "now I think keeping things true matters more." I smiled. That was growth. The biggest change, though, was inside me. I stopped measuring my worth by how much access I had to others. I stopped waiting for invitations to feel valid. I built a life that didn't depend on anyone's approval. I volunteered at the community center. Took a painting class I'd put off for years. Made friends who knew me not as someone's mother but as myself. So when Rachel occasionally pulled back, as people sometimes do, it didn't undo me. I stayed whole. The last time I thought about the chair at that birthday party was when my grandson climbed onto my lap at another family gathering, unprompted, and declared, "This is my grandma." Rachel laughed. Everett snapped a picture. No one flinched. That chair no longer mattered. What mattered was this. I had learned how to stay without shrinking, and that lesson followed me everywhere. By the time my grandson turned 3, the past felt like something I could look at without flinching, not because it didn't hurt anymore, but because it no longer defined me. Life settled into a rhythm that felt earned. I visited when invited. I invited them when I wanted. Sometimes they came, sometimes they didn't. And for the first time, either outcome felt acceptable. That was freedom. Rachel and I never became close in the way some women do. We didn't share secrets or shop together or linger on the phone, but we learned how to stand in the same room without tension pulling at the air. That matters more than people think. One afternoon, while we were cleaning up after lunch, she said something that stayed with me. "I didn't realize how strong you were," she said casually, wiping the counter. I looked up. "Strength isn't loud." She nodded. "I know that now." That acknowledgement wasn't a trophy. It was confirmation that my quiet refusal to disappear had been noticed. Everett, too, had changed in ways that surprised me. He no longer avoided discomfort. When disagreements arose, he stayed present. He listened. He spoke. He stopped confusing peace with avoidance. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the baby monitor flicker, he said, "I don't want my son growing up thinking love means silence." I looked at him, then show him otherwise. He smiled. "I am." Those moments mattered more than apologies. Time has a way of smoothing sharp edges, but it also reveals what's solid underneath. What surprised me most was how often other women began to confide in me. At the community center, at the library, at the grocery store, mothers-in-law, grandmothers, different stories, same ache. "I don't want to lose my son. I feel like I have to walk on eggshells. I'm scared if I speak up, I'll be cut off." I listened. I didn't advise unless asked, and when they did ask, I told them the truth. "You don't have to choose between love and dignity," I said, "but you do have to decide which one you're willing to lose." Some nodded, some cried, some weren't ready. I understood all of them. Because there was a version of me that would have done anything to stay welcome. That would have accepted any seat, any condition, any silence. I didn't judge her. She did what she knew how to do, but I no longer lived as her. The last time Rachel and I spoke about the past was unexpectedly ordinary. We were folding laundry together, tiny shirts, tiny socks. I wish I'd handled things differently, she said suddenly. I folded another shirt. So do I, she glanced at me. Really? Yes, I said. I wish I'd spoken sooner. She considered that. I think we were both afraid, she said. Fear makes us do strange things, I replied. She nodded. I'm glad we didn't let it win. So was I. The memory of that birthday party still exists. I can picture the balloons, the noise, the chair at the back of the room, but now when I think of it, I don't feel humiliation. I feel clarity. That was the moment I learned something essential. Exclusion isn't always loud, control isn't always cruel. And love that requires you to disappear isn't love at all. The lesson didn't just change my relationship with my family, it changed my relationship with myself. I stopped shrinking in other areas too. I spoke up at appointments. I asked for what I needed. I said no without apology. People adjusted. The ones who couldn't weren't meant to stay close. That's another truth no one tells you soon enough. One evening, as I tucked my grandson into bed during a visit, he reached for my hand. Stay, he said. I'm right here, I replied, and I was fully. Without condition, without permission, just present. That was enough. I used to think the hardest part of motherhood was letting go. I was wrong. The hardest part is learning how to stay, not physically, emotionally, staying present without clinging, staying loving without erasing yourself. Staying open even after you've been quietly pushed aside. No one teaches you how to do that. When I look back now, I don't see a villain and a victim. I see a family that didn't know how to handle fear honestly. I see a young woman who believed control would protect her. I see a son who thought peace meant silence. And I see myself, well-meaning, patient, slowly disappearing. That birthday party wasn't the beginning of the problem. It was the moment the problem finally spoke out loud. The table is full. Get out of here. Those words didn't just tell me where to sit. They told me who I was allowed to be, and for a long time I believed them. I believed that being quiet made me kind, that being flexible made me loving. That being agreeable made me safe. But safety that costs you your voice is not safety. It's surrender. I want to say something gently now, especially to the women listening who recognize themselves in my story. If you are always the one adjusting, if you are always the one understanding, if you are always the one stepping back so others can feel comfortable, ask yourself this: who is making space for you? Because love does not require you to shrink. Boundaries do not require humiliation. And respect does not arrive when you earn it by suffering quietly. It arrives when you decide you are worthy of it. I didn't change my family by yelling. I didn't change them by threatening or walking away in anger. I changed them by stopping the slow, invisible retreat I had been practicing for years. I stood still. And when I stood still, the truth caught up. Some relationships survived that truth. Some didn't, but I survived all of it. That's the part that matters most. Today, my grandson sits beside me at the table without anyone assigning seats. He calls me grandma with his whole chest like it's something solid and sure. Rachel and I speak honestly even when it's uncomfortable. Everett looks at me now, really looks, and I can see recognition where there used to be assumption. We are not perfect, but we are real. And real is something you can build on. If you're listening to this and wondering whether speaking up will cost you everything, let me tell you what staying silent cost me. Years of quiet ache, moments I'll never get back, a version of myself that slowly faded into the background. I don't regret being patient, but I do regret not being present sooner. So if you're standing at the edge of a room, holding a gift no one asked for, wondering where you belong where you are seen. And if that place doesn't exist yet, sometimes you have to create it by refusing to move when someone tells you to disappear. Before I go, I want to ask you something. If you had been in my place, if someone had told you calmly and politely that there was no room for you anymore, would you have walked away quietly? Or would you have done what I finally did and stayed? Tell me in the comments. Your story matters more than you think. And if this story spoke to something in you, if it made you feel less alone, consider supporting this channel, subscribing, and sharing it with someone who needs to hear this tonight. Sometimes the bravest thing we do isn't leaving. It's choosing not to disappear. Thank you for listening.